attention. Before the meeting begins, we ask that everyone please silence your cell phones. The Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees meeting is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, patrons may only address the board during the designated audience items section on the agenda. If you have printed materials you want to give the board members, you must provide them to me or any other officer present, and we will provide them to the board. We also ask that members of the audience be respectful of others by remaining quiet so that everyone is able to hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. The time is 12:03 p.m., and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum attending in person, and notice of this meeting has been posted online and at the Fort Bend ISD Administration Building for at least 72 hours. We'll start with public comment, and there are 0 speakers, so we'll move on to the information item. And the information item is item A, the proposed bond 2023 overview. And Mr. Gwynn will be presenting for us this afternoon.
Yes, Madam President. Give me just a moment, please. I need to make one adjustment here on my side. You all feel free to talk amongst yourselves as we wait. Rhode Island, it's not a road or an island. Discuss.
What did he say? He said Rhode Island is not a road or an island. Please discuss.
Not that levity should ever be introduced into a board meeting, but recall we were told at the last board meeting or prior one that laughter is a powerful ingredient. So I'm introducing that this afternoon.
Well, Mr. Gwynn, thanks for the jokes. Keep them coming.
Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman. Parkways and driveways. You don't drive on a parkway, or park on a parkway, or drive on a driveway. Okay, I'm ready to go now. I'm here all week, by the way. You got no. So to start out the process, this is a rehash of what we shared with you all on Monday evening. But as a reminder, in terms of how we've put together the proposed bond package for the 2023, is we started with our Bond Oversight Committee. That's a group that is made up of stakeholders across the community, including business leaders and community members, who provided feedback throughout the process as we built the 23 bond. We also shared with the Greater Fort Bend Economic Development Council the proposed bond, as well as the anticipated impact on the tax rate. And they did vote unanimously at their, or I shouldn't say, overwhelmingly is probably a better way. We did not hear any nays, but they voted overwhelmingly in support of the proposed bond package as it had been presented for the $1.2 million. In addition to that, I think you all are aware we did a community survey in which 350 voters were actually surveyed. It had a 5.2% margin of error, 90% voted in the last election, and we found with no pre-education process during that, 52% of those voters would support a $1.2 billion bond. When you had actually educated them, it increased to 68%. And so there is a high degree of support among the bond once voters are educated. And of course, that would be one of the cornerstones of our efforts as if the board opts to move forward. For the 23 proposed bond, it totals $1.21 billion, and it's made up of 2 propositions as it was originally proposed. We have some alternatives that we'll share with you shortly, but as we've shared that with the $1.2 billion, and we had some questions previously, anything above $1 billion will essentially require 1 cent or 1 penny on the INS rate. And so what I would say, though, is that our existing tax rate of $1.1346 will not change. If anything, it would go down even with this additional penny. And so it's important to recognize that we've done what we can to constrain the bond within the existing tax rate and trying to have no more than a 1 cent impact on our INS rate. Proposition A is $1.16 billion. That includes the new schools, renovations, and rebuilds. Also, about $615 million in life cycle deficiencies. safety and security, transportation, and then it also includes technology infrastructure. This is going to be the underlying technology that supports the district, not the actual devices. So wireless hotspots and the other switches necessary to keep the infrastructure up and running, or the network up and running. And then finally, Proposition B at $52.5 million includes technology devices for students and staff. I won't dwell on this slide, but this is a detailed breakdown of the actual bond, including major projects of construction, the deficiencies that I just mentioned, safety and security at $5.6 million, transportation at $9.7 million, and then that technology infrastructure that we mentioned is going to be at about, I just lost my train of thought there. Technology is at a total of $119 million, with $52.5 million of that being for the Proposition B, the classroom tool set, and staff computer refresh that requires voter authorization to move forward. There are several options that we've put together for the board to review as you make your consideration on this. Option one is what we just walked through, the $1.2 billion with two propositions, both as were just presented, so there's nothing new there. This is what the actual ballot language would look like for Proposition A. We've shared that with you in your packet, and so you would see the $1.16 billion in Proposition A, and we've shared with you all and with the public that no matter how we word this proposition, the final sentence on there has to say, this is a property tax increase, and that language is included as required. Proposition B for the $52.5 million, this is the technology component, and this is how that ballot language would read. Option two for consideration would be to do the bond with an auditorium included. We shared with you previously that any type of sports complex or sports facility is required to be on a separate proposition. And so this maintains A and B as we presented it to you just previously and adds in an auditorium for consideration on a Proposition C, and that would be $22.9 million. And so our total bond would still be at $1,236 million, and so that number is actually what would go forward for voter considerations. But they wouldn't see that in the aggregate. They would see three propositions for these separate amounts that you're seeing on the slide in front of you. This would be Proposition C ballot language, so it's highlighting the $22.9 million. And it would be in addition to the other two propositions that we just mentioned. A third option that we have would be to include a bus facility. Again, a bus facility would be categorized under Proposition A, and so we would maintain Proposition A as presented, but add in $19.2 million. And so Proposition A revised would be $1.18 billion. With Proposition B unchanged. And so the total of that bond would be $1.233 billion if it moved forward as this. And then this is the language it would revise Proposition A to reflect that. It would fall under the construction and acquisition of capital renovation of school buildings, so no additional language would need to be added to the ballot for that specific proposition, for that change to the proposition. And then the final option would be to move forward with both the bus facility and the auditorium. Proposition A as presented would be increased by the $19.2 million for $1.18830 or $1.18 billion. Proposition B would remain as presented as it has throughout all of these. And then Proposition C would also be included on the ballot. And so our total bond package would be $1.256 billion. And the analysis that we've done using the 1 penny tax rate does support up to a 1.2 billion-ish without having to go above that. And again, we feel like with compression on the M&O side or the maintenance and operation side of the tax rate, we would stay comfortably at or below $1.1346 over the life of the bond for as it has been presented. And with that, we can answer any questions that you all may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gwynn. Board, do we have questions, discussion? And we will start with Mrs. Day.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say, to me, this is a pretty long journey and a learning curve. Many months I've been asking questions and information, and I really want to thank you, the team, for being so patient with me. And I'm the person who really needs the information in order to make a decision. And I also wanted to point it out. I believe the board, all of us, including myself, we are open to different options, including the lower amount of the bonds or the higher amount of the bonds. That's why we have so many discussions and asking for many information. I wanted to say at 4:32 p.m. yesterday, I decided I'm ready to support the recommendation from the administration. So for many reasons, but I'm just going to mention a few. I think this, just like Mr. Guan just presented, the package makes most financial sense. And it seems like a very good amount of money for the district to spend on the priority one items and also the new facilities and the rebuilt campus, including 2 elementary school and Clements. And also, district also very clearly for the timeline of constructions. I personally really appreciate that. So it seems like the 2 new elementary school will expect to open maybe the fall 2025. And then the Clements the construction will start in spring 2024. And then the students expected to move to the new building at fall 2027. That's very exciting for the community and for all the students. So that being said, if I will ask if someone can reflect those comments in the minutes, I would be really appreciate that. That being said, I am ready to cast my vote. Thank you, everyone.
Well, Ms. Day, thank you. I'm glad you're ready. And I share much of your sentiments, so I will not repeat that. But now, Ms. Hannon, you have comments. Go ahead.
I'll just make my comments now instead of when we call for the item on the agenda. I appreciate that Ms. Day has announced her preparedness to vote. I think our public is waiting on us, and because I'm not sure which proposition is going to be read, well, we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But what I do want to say is I appreciate that staff has provided us with these options, because what I considered on Monday when I saw the different options, and I thought to myself, you shared with us the cost, the estimate, kind of ballpark for the maintenance and operation of a transportation facility. You gave us a bit of a ballpark number for what it would cost to, from M&O to sustain a new natatorium. And as I considered those and considered the cost with the budget and the situation we're in right now with the deficit, in my mind, I still had to support the transportation facility and the natatorium for several reasons. And some of those reasons are because I think our public, this is when they get to actually have a serious say in what our school district looks like. So maybe they say, I would like the busing to be more efficient for my kids. So maybe my student doesn't have to wait so long at the bus stop because there's an east side transportation facility. And maybe we don't have some of those stacked issues. And I'm sure that there are also some cons to that as well. But the same would hold true, even though we have some maintenance and operation on a third natatorium, or we don't have 3 natatoriums, we only have 2. We do have, our school district, for people that don't know, spans 179 square miles. And that's a long way to travel for some kids, and it's actually their parents that are traveling to get them there if they don't have their driver's license. So I really appreciate and hope that the board will consider those additional items, the additional Proposition A item of the bus terminal, the new bus terminal, and Proposition C, which would include an auditorium, because I do think it brings a little bit more equity to the east side of our district for a sport that is a lifelong sport. Once you learn it, there's, you've got it for life. So anyway, I'm with Ms. Day. I'm prepared to vote and get this out to our public so that on May 6th or before that, they'll be able to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hannon. Mr. Hamilton.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Gwynn, for that presentation. Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick procedural question. I think Mrs. Day was getting at this. So what's the process going to be like as far as how will we propose one of the four options? I guess, will there just be an amendment for one of the four? And
Sorry. So we're in discussion right now just on the information item, and when we get to action, a board member will then
so she'll make an amendment for one of the four options, I guess? And
no,
then,
someone will make a motion.
right.
Yeah.
For one of the four options.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So if, I'll say that it's probably a good thing that we waited and did not vote on this on Monday night. So I think that we do need this bond, and that it's what's best for the kids. And I think it's what's best for the district from a financial standpoint. If you look at the cost breakdown that we got today with the transportation facility, it's in the overall financial interest, and will actually save us money versus covering longer distances to get to the current transportation facilities. And then you look at Clemens High School, Briargate Elementary, Mission Bend Elementary. I think if the maintenance projections are over the next 5 years, but I think if you go probably 10 years, then I bet we're in about the same dollar amount if you compare building the new school versus continuing to put Band-Aids on all the problems from a maintenance standpoint. And so you have the cost of building of rebuilding the campuses, and you get the benefit of having a brand new school that the kids will be excited about and the community will embrace and be excited about. And so I'm planning to vote yes, and my preference, along with Trustee Hannon, is to go ahead and do the transportation facility and the natatorium, and let the voters decide on those items. And then I'll just add that I hope we make some strides in the trust department between now and election day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm also prepared to vote. I think that, I will say that it's unfortunate that not all of our trustees are here, because I think the community deserves to know where we all stand. It's very hard to come to these meetings and do everything that we need to do here. The public needs to know that there was a lot of work that staff has put in to this beyond just what we do on a monthly basis once a month. We don't just meet once a month. We've had workshops, we've had team buildings, and when folks aren't at these meetings, it does make it very difficult for us to all be on the same page. So I think it is very unfortunate that we are missing certain members of the board. But for the most part, we're all in sync. We're all in alignment. We all want what's best for this district. It's unfortunate to see comments out there that says Briargate's closing permanently, which is not true. So I want the people to know that, and I would also, and I've been looking into this because I do fact check a lot. I spend a lot of time doing that. So when I hear folks say that some schools aren't going to get rebuilt and this and that, I go back and I kind of want to look and see historically when we've gone to 2014 bond or 2018 bond, and we say we're going to build a new school in this area or we're going to rebuild a new school in this area, how many times have we actually said it and not done it? Because I can't really find an instance where that's happened. So I just wanted to bring that out. I am kind of on the fence between option 3 and option 4. I think in practice you don't want to spend money on something that you don't have the money to pay for. So if we're already in a budget deficit and we're paying for additional overhead costs on an auditorium, I kind of go back and forth on that. But at the same time, I agree with Trustee Hannon's position that we're not where we need to be, I think, in that area. And you look at other districts where they have requirements for children to go and learn how to swim at certain ages, and you see other school districts where they have far more natatoriums, and we only have 2, and then the practice facilities and things like that. So I do kind of go back and forth on that. But I think in practice, we shouldn't be spending money to build the facilities that we don't really have the money to operate. So that's kind of my, like I said, I go back and forth on that. I'm in full support of the transportation facility, looking at what the annual savings would be, and actually the annual savings could go back to help pay for operating the natatorium when you look at it. So it kind of just made sense right there. So, but yes, I am prepared to vote, and I want to thank everybody for all of their support, all this hard work. I know we've come a long way, and we're far overdue on a bond. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Do y'all see her? Okay. Okay, I want to I'm sorry, guys. Trustee Williams is trying to attend the meeting and having a difficult time accessing it. So I'm going to take a 5-minute recess so we can square things up and get her into the meeting. All right. Thank you, folks. right. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. The time is 12:32 p.m. and we are now back in open session. And welcome, Ms. Williams. Are you here? I don't see you.
She should be under Ryland.
I see Ryland, but Ms. Williams, can you come? All right. Welcome. Thank you. And Mr. Pham, just wanted to give you a chance to
Yes.
let everyone know what.
So as a protocol, security protocol, we usually do not allow anyone whom we have not identified as a person who has been invited to get on, to make sure that we don't have Zoom bombing. That thing occurred many times in the beginning of COVID. So without being identified as Ms. Williams, we wouldn't know who it is.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And Ms. Williams, I don't know what's going on with your camera, but you're like super blurry. It's not very clear. All right, Dr. Gilliam. We'll move on to you. We're back to our discussion on the information item. Item A, proposed bond 2023 overview, and we'll convene in discussion. Go ahead, Ms.
Yes, I just would like to share. First of all, thank you, staff, for the hours and hours and hours that you all put into this project and the diligence to complete it and to answer the questions that we had as a board. The presentation from last week and how we had it, it provided a clearer picture. I know for me, it opened many, many doors. And I could see where we were, where we are, and then how we got here. And that helps me a lot, knowing how we got to this point. And now we can work on, of course, making it better and planning for the future. So we can make sure that we are doing what is best for our taxpayers as well as for our students, our educators, and all who are part of the school system, the Fort Bend ISD school system. And yes, I do plan to vote yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Gilliam. Mr. Villasenor, I see you're there, and I wanted to thank you for being with us this afternoon. And I presume they let you know my question the other day regarding the 20% and having to change the strategic finance and budget policy. Would you mind sharing on that?
I'll be glad to. And
particularly how it would relate to our bond rating, sir.
Sure. And thank you for the invitation this afternoon. I'm assuming you folks can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. The reference to the 1/12 that's in the current policy that I believe was being discussed at your last meeting is really a throwback to the Tax Reform Act of 1986, when for the very first time governmental and municipalities were restricted from taking investments that you folks would make and those earnings from those investments to basically be able to keep those and then simply reinvest them in whatever your construction projects were at the time. Some years back, that whole mechanism, which is driven by, unfortunately, IRS regulations, and some folks might ask, well, gosh, why we're issuing tax-exempt bonds? Why is the IRS, why do they get in the middle of this? And the reason for that is because you issued tax-exempt bonds, the earnings of which are tax-exempt to the holders of those obligations. And so the IRS has over the years, over many, many years, put together regulations to sort of limit, and in fact with the Tax Reform Act of 1986, pretty much eliminated school districts and other governmental entities from being able to keep those investment earnings and then simply reinvest those in the projects. So they limit those investment earnings now to, I believe it's still 1/8 of 1% above the borrowing rate. And so whenever the earnings exceed that, there is this mechanism, again, in the Treasury regs, to rebate back to the IRS any earnings in excess of that allowable yield. And so the only thing I could think of when I read that the other night when you folks were meeting is that in the years following the Tax Reform Act of 1986, a lot of folks, particularly in the finance area, thought that rebating excess earnings to the IRS was sort of a bad word, and so they were inclined, where possible, to be able to limit those rebates back to the federal government. I think based on what has happened since that time is we probably want to get with your staff and your tax attorney at Bracewell and maybe modify that language a little bit so that it's sort of brought now, to the 21st century. But again, what we've told governmental entities more recently is that if you are put in a position where the staff brings to you folks the fact that they want you to authorize a rebate payment back to the IRS, to the federal government, that's really okay. And the reason that's okay is because we know that you've maximized the earnings on those investments. That's number one. Number two, the other thing the IRS regs say is that you cannot use any artifice or device to limit those investment earnings. Because that's what folks tried to do early on. So again, we probably should dust off the language a little bit, bring it into the 21st century. But Ms. Malone, in answer to your question, it will not and does not impact the ratings of the school district, because the rating agencies all understand what you folks have been going through, going all the way back to 1986. And they understand, as we do now, that rebates back to the federal government are okay. We'd love to keep them all, but that they're okay because it shows the community that you've maximized those investment earnings.
Yeah, nothing like giving the IRS more. All right, so what I heard is essentially the policy's outdated, and we need to update the policy, and that there are no financial consequences to Fort Bend ISD for adjusting the 20%. And we're good to go.
No.
All right,
Yes.
So we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, thank you, Mr. Villasenor. I value your insight tremendously, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to provide that clarity. Thank you, sir.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. Have a good one. Okay.
Thank you.
So I have just one kind of question for you, Mr. Gwynn, and we all alluded to it, and I'm so grateful that you provided the transportation operational facilities for including a new bus barn. And can you remind me, so I see that essentially we're going to have a net gain of essentially $2.6 million in savings, right, from that annually?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
No, so total 500,000.
So the net, I'm sorry, sir, you are correct.
So that's the net gain, the net, I'm sorry, is 500,000?
Correct.
And what's the cost to operate the natatorium?
The cost to operate an auditorium is around $250,000 annually.
Okay, so overall between those two, we'd still be having operational efficiencies and having a net gain of $250,000.
Correct. The one thing that I would say related to the transportation facility is there are some assumed cost savings that are in there when we bring online Middle School 16, as well as Crawford and the other elementary schools. So this is a fully baked, everything is operating at peak efficiency. However, it will take a number of successive years to get up to that ultimate operating efficiency point. So just keep that in mind as you look at this. This is assuming ultimate operations, not as we stand today, with the addition of those new campuses.
So this isn't as of today. This is in the years to come.
That's correct.
Okay.
But it's also important to point out, I mean, we're not going to have this right away. I mean, it's going to be, by the time it's built, it'll probably be, 3 years from now, and then we'll be able to, you will have some more of those schools will be in place.
All All right, so essentially 3 years for the transportation facility, and what's the outlook on the natatorium? I know Ms. Day specifically went over the construction of the schools, but natatorium, what's the outlook on that?
Carolyn, do you have that?
I'm sorry, and you asked about transportation facility, correct? Or natatorium?
No, ma'am, he said transportation is 3 years out, natatoriums.
So the natatorium, if we were to, if,
Turn it on.
as for the natatorium, if we were to start construction immediately after the bond passes, we could have it up and running by the end of 2025.
Okay, so now I'm going to defer back to you, Mr. Gwynn. Is that in our best interest to get that up by 2025, considering the deficit we're currently operating?
So from a strictly finance perspective, the answer to that is probably no. What we do have going for us right now is we know the legislature's in session, and we don't know what the ultimate outcome of that's going to be. So we're in a position where we have the ability to do a wait and see, and the fortunate part is almost immediately after, if the voters approve the bond, we'll have clarity from a legislative standpoint. And so it may be that we need to postpone the implementation of this until finances improve, or the board would be willing to do a VATRE in conjunction with the construction so that as it opens, the operating funds are in place. Fortunately, we're not talking about a sizable amount. It is under $1 million considerably, and so finding that capacity within our overall budget is realistic.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that. So lastly, out of these four options, can you please let us know what is the district's recommendation to the Board of Trustees?
So if the natatorium is going to be included as a separate option, our recommendation is option 4, to include the bus facility.
Okay, thank you, sir. And for that,
And-
I do support option 4. All right, well, that closes up our discussion. We'll move on to action, which is consider.
Excuse me.
Oh, Miss Williams, I'm so sorry, Miss Williams. You are extremely blurry. You can't even make out your face or see anything.
Well, it's me.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're here. We welcome your input. Thank you for speaking up and letting me know you wanted to add in. You've got the floor,
exactly,
ma'am.
Because, right, and I need to clear up something. I've been waiting since 11:52. I do understand the district not allowing me in because the Zoom account is under my grandson's name. So you were doing what was needed and not letting me in because you didn't know who I was. So I understand why I wasn't allowed to come in the meeting. With that being said, I had a question for you. When, as it relates to the items that we are including, the schools and the deferred maintenance, when did we meet to discuss the items that would be included on the bond? I'm confused about that date.
Many different times, but very specifically last Thursday, we went through a very extensive workshop where we could call out particular schools, and PBK Architects, they attended the meeting as well, and they shared with us the facility conditions report that they had, where they could drill into a smart sheet and show photos of, for example, chillers or roofs or foundation issues, and they would point to the issue, and then in addition to that, they would show the construction costs, they would show the roll-in costs, or soft costs that are associated with the capital project to bring it to completion. And then in addition, they also showed the inflation rate in there. They also had contingency. And there was a very, honestly, Ms. Williams, I wish you had had the opportunity to join us because that meeting was instrumental in changing folks position that sit on the dais or trustees from where we were to where we are today because we saw the evidence. They provided accountability, they provided transparency and communication that clearly stated and communicated to us that they had Fort Bend ISD's best interest for all stakeholders district-wide.
Okay,
And I can
that's
tell
what
you,
I'm
for me,
speaking of.
Ms. Williams, that was the game changer, because prior to that, I was struggling to understand where these numbers were coming from, but it was extremely insightful, and I believe it was recorded, and I welcome you to watch it back. In addition to that, I want to let you know just a couple things. Number one, that data is available for us to review, and I think we're going to be reviewing maybe, I don't know, in something maybe quarterly or something once we get the bond rolling, to have check-ins on it and see where we're at, and that'll correspond with the data that's on the website under the bond program that's already public-facing. And I also welcome you to watch that back. And I know that Carolina Fazzetti, she is very insightful for all things facilities and maintenance district-wide, and I'm willing to bet she'd sit down with you and answer any questions regarding any particular facility or show you information regarding a specific campus. But that thing, it dug into all of the details, from the tile, the paint, the chillers, the roof, furniture, fixtures, you name it.
Respectfully, that wasn't the question. As for the meeting you had last Thursday, I purposely didn't attend because I didn't need that information. I was pretty clear on what type of construction items they were speaking of. What I'm speaking of is who decided that we're going to build a new Brigade, a new high school and clinics, etc. I'm speaking of those items.
So all of this is recommendations from the district to the board. This isn't, the board didn't decide these things. These are things that the district has recommended to the board for consideration and action.
Right, and that's what I was just trying to be clear, because I remember when we met with Dr. Lynchburg, we were clear that it was the board's bond, that we would then decide what we wanted to have on the bond, and then we would, work together collectively to see what the board wanted, what the administration wanted, and reach a conclusion. So what I'm hearing you state is that the board didn't have a meeting to discuss our priorities.
Well, for example,
Correct?
last week on Thursday, we did discuss, and also in other meetings, discussed the rebuild possibilities. And I think the biggest thing on that was Mr. Bassett and Mr. Gwynn, they shared with us the operational efficiencies district-wide and essentially how we were operating and what kind of impact that could have to the district over the long term. But had the board given the signal, if you will, in response to those presentations that we weren't interested, then administration would not have gone forward with the recommendation. Does that make sense? That the board did signal.
Okay. So what I'm stating is, I just want to be clear. Like you stated, if we were opposed to this, we would have articulated that to the administration and given them other options. So that's what I'm trying to make the public be aware of. What? Is that the administration brought it to us, to the board. The board did not object to the items, and that's where we are today. This is what the board wanted, what the administration wanted, correct?
Well, in all fairness, Ms. Williams, every single construction project and every single package is going to come back to the board for approval every single time. So whether it's myself is still on the board, or if you're there, or whoever is here, they will still have to approve every single project. In addition to that, they will have to approve every single contingency item, just as we typically do.
Exactly. And I really appreciate you, Kristen, because you're answering my questions are very transparent. Is what I'm getting the public to understand. Just because the board is voting on a $1.2 billion bond today does not necessarily mean when the administration come to us and say, hey, let's use $47 million to build a new elementary school. We do not necessarily have to agree to build that school. We can say, no, we don't need to.
Oh, well, Ms. Williams, I can speak for myself here. I can only speak for myself. Well, I will only speak for myself on that one, but I can tell you what, Ms. Williams, specifically if you're referring to Briargate and Missions, and if I'm sitting on this dais in the future when that comes in front of me, absolutely I will vote to do that because we made a promise to those communities and the district made a promise, and when we voted for consolidation, that was contingent on that. And so I hear what you're saying. You're saying essentially we could do some sort of bait and switch trickery. And I'm saying, no, ma'am, that I look around this room and I don't see anyone here who has that in mind, that I believe we have integrity, that there's accountability and transparency going on today. And I'm proud of how far we've come because we're really working together for the greater good of all kids. So if that's what you were intending on or like trying to allude to on those two campuses specifically, I'm just going to say for me, ma'am, my vote is going to be with those two schools every time.
And you know what? I believe you. I believe that you are going to be a person of your word. That's not what I'm trying to get at. There's no guarantee you're going to be elected next May. There's no guarantee I'm going to be there. Rose Gillum and our the other trustee, her name's escaping me right now. But it's no guarantee we're going to be there. So with that being said, if we vote on this today, whomever is in our seats in the future don't necessarily have to agree with us. So I'm not accusing anyone on the dais of doing a bait and switch. Because I would sit here right now and say, I don't believe that the majority of you would do a bait and switch. I'm just not willing to say that right now. I'm not. But with that being said, I know we're here to do a vote, and I just wanted the public to understand that I, as a trustee, was not involved in choosing what the board would vote on. That was not my objective. And number two, I can't control what happens in the future. I have no control over that. What happens with these bond proceeds?
Ms. Malone, I call for end of the debate.
Okay.
Oh, it's not a debate, it's a statement.
All right. Ms. Williams says.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And yes, Dr. Whitbeck, would you please provide some clarification?
So I think in walking back to the original question that I took a note on here about, how long have we been meeting and knowing preparation last year prior to the budget that the board adopted in June. We began to speak to the board about the bond at open meetings, workshops, agenda reviews, meetings. And that was all part of looking at the deficit, looking at the future, looking at a possible VATRE and a possible bond. And then as we moved through the summer, we would bring it up again, have different examples of what's going on. The FCI index that we use to determine the condition of the buildings and our facilities is a huge driver, as is enrollment, as is location, and multiple times in meetings. Some, Ms. Williams, you've attended, some you have not. We have shared that criteria with the community. Thereby, we are taking care of the three highest condition index schools. Number one, Clements, number two, Blue Ridge, number three, Briargate. And so the list goes on, but we are addressing it in a very strategic way. So we've had these meetings throughout the fall, actually, as well. And so many times the community has heard us speak about this and why the contents of the bond are what they are.
Okay, so I need to respond to that whether or not I was there. My attendance record is readily available. So I have been at the meetings. And as I stated, the first I've heard of Clements was when I saw this on the workshop book, February the 6th, 2023. That was the first time I've seen that. I'm not debating the fact we have not discussed having a 2023 bond. I'm not debating that. That's a fact. We have spoke of having a bond. That's a fact. What I was stating was the actual items that's going to be voted upon. It's what I'm saying. So I'm not debating. We have had the discussion with the bond and the BATRE.
Well, I think our recollections are definitely different, because I remember.
Yeah, they're going to be different when it becomes time to vote on building those new skills. We're going to also pick and choose what we remember. But I'm going to be here to remind you. So if you want to end the debate, let's end it. But
Okay.
I'm not here
I'm
for
not-
you to try to diminish what. Let me finish. I'm not here for you to try and diminish my comments. My comments are my comments. You have the 6 votes. We're going to put this bond on the ballot. And if it passes, congratulations.
Okay.
I'm happy
Well, Ms.
that we're
Williams,
headed to a new direction.
Ms. Williams, thank you for your comments. We appreciate your
And thank you.
participation. I do, for the record, though, want to make sure that it's clear to the public that Clements was not just brought to us in February, that this has been there since, May of 2022? Or even before that, before you guys were elected. There was talk in public session. So,
Be mindful, I was elected before you. So if it was on the agenda, I would know before you know. You're not going to diminish what I'm saying.
Ms. Williams,
It's
I'm not.
happen.
Ms. Williams, I am not.
You will not. Let's end the debate, as Trustee Hanan stated. Let's end the debate because you will not diminish what I'm saying. You will
All right,
not do that.
Ms. Williams.
Let's vote.
Thank you. It's not time to vote yet, but thank you for your assistance. Yes, Ms. Day.
So I may ask for the legal counsel for clarification. So just so the public we are all on the same page. Because Ms. Williams saying if we pass the bond today, the project can be switched. So I just want to clarify that's not my can someone clarify that, please?
I think that question is better addressed by your bond counsel, Mr. Frous.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Can I ask the communication, make sure we communicate this message clearly to the community? Thank you.
I didn't hear what
Thank you, Mr.
I thought I was on mute. I couldn't hear him.
Well, I was not on. Okay, sorry about that. I apologize. I'll go ahead and repeat that just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to hear it. The board, when it adopts the election order, is also going to be presenting to the public a package of bond projects that they intend to undertake in connection with the bond election. Under Texas law, there's a general provision that talks about contracts with the voters. It generally holds you to what you tell the voters you are intending to do in connection with the project. There may be a very remote circumstance where the facts that are underlying what you're doing today don't come to fruition in the future, and you may be able to make a change in the projects. But generally, you are constrained by what you tell the public you are going to do.
And are you able to define the word intent? What does that mean?
So what I mean by intent is that you are putting before the public a package that is the expectation of what the district will proceed with in connection with this bond.
And if we decide not to proceed, hypothetically, let's say, for instance, if we find that we don't need to do a certain project. We want to do something else with the funds, as has been the case with the 2018 bond, when we told them we're going to build a middle school, then we didn't do that. So we do have the prerogative to change what we want to do with the bond money.
Yeah,
Hence
so
the word intent, what we intended to do.
So-
we had an intention to. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what I would say is there is a very narrow set of circumstances under which you can make changes when it would not make sense for the public to expend money for that particular purpose for a very specific set of circumstances. And there's a process under law that we go through in reviewing that and making that determination, and the board has to make findings as it relates to those items if there's ever that circumstance. And it is not a standard operating procedure by any means. It is something that just comes up in a very particular fact pattern.
And could you please reference the part of the education code or whatever code you're reading that has that verbiage in it?
So this is a common law. So there are a set of cases that are related to the contract with the voter concept. I'd be happy to provide some of those cases to the administration so that you have those and they're available. But it is a common law concept as opposed to a statutory concept.
The common law concept. Okay, thank you for that information. That's what I want the public to know. Nothing that I'm saying is with bad intent. I just want the public to know when we vote on something, we have the prerogative as a body corporate to change our mind. We have that prerogative. That's not a bad thing. We may feel that we don't need a school. So it's just based on what we want to do with the funds. Period. But thank you, Council.
Ms. Malone.
Ms. Malone. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Scamardo. Just wanted to add, though, that one key system that we have in Fort Bend ISD that I think has historically been very strong is bond oversight. So we have an entire committee comprised of professionals, laymen, parents, and they look at everything that we're doing. And so should there ever need to be a change or even a desire to have a change because of the one example, for example, you gave, Mr. Farrell's about the population just didn't come in that area, then it would go to bond oversight even before it would come to the board. So they would have that input into would you want to use, here's another need that popped up that was unexpected. But historically, we stay true. The example of Middle School 16, and Mr. Gwynn, please correct me, let's clarify this because I think this is very important because it's my understanding that Middle School 16 was in the 2018 bond for design. And that is why it is in the bond now in 2023 to build it. So it's one thing to have land and to design it. It is another thing to build it. And so this bond passing will allow it to actually become a true middle school to provide relief in the Hightower and the Sienna area.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. That is, do we have any additional discussion? And Mr. Scamardo, did you want to add something?
I wanted to make sure that what Dr. Whitbeck said was in the record, that Bond 2018 was the design, purchase of land and design of Middle School 16. There was no commitment to build at that time. So what Ms. Williams stated was not accurate. So
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it. And Mrs. Hannon.
And I need to say something. What he said that wasn't accurate. It's a public record, and the bond, and we voted to build Middle School 16 out of that bond. So we have a difference of opinion there. So Mr. Scamardo was not correct.
Ms. Williams, it's not an opinion; it's a fact. You can agree or not, but it's a fact.
Okay, Ms. Williams, with all due respect, we've heard it. We will make sure your comments are on the record as Mr. Scamardo's and Dr. Whitbeck's, and let's move on, please.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Ms. Hannon.
Before we vote, I would just like to publicly thank all of the staff who has helped my colleagues on the dais fulfill the obligation that we have in the Board of Ethics. And one of those says, I will focus my attention on fulfilling the board's responsibilities and duties. And I am truly grateful to all of you who read everything, you attended every meeting, you were there, because voting on $1.2 billion is, in my opinion, a serious issue, right? So another one, I know that every one of you diligently prepared, because I saw you at the meetings. I saw you right when our board meetings were called to order. You were here in a timely way. And just like we hope that our children have attendance and they start the day ready to learn and go, that's important. And so I appreciate you respecting that time is a precious commodity. I know this is hard in the middle of the workday, but I actually just want to publicly thank you, and I hope that that can be reflected in the minutes, that I truly appreciate the colleagues here. Another item I'd like reflected in the minutes is my name is Hannon, and it rhymes with Shannon. Thank you.
All right.
And I need to thank you because I don't want to appear to be ungrateful. I do appreciate the council and all of the employees who showed ethics, because I looked at our conflict of interest forms on the front of the board website, and now I do not see one of my fellow trustees' name on that conflict of interest whose spouse is doing business with the district but one. So I too want to thank the trustees for being very professional and sitting on their board for a reason, not expecting to be paid. So I too thank my colleagues and every other individual in that room, because it's not but one of us who appears on the front page of the district website as it relates to their spouse receiving payments in the tune of $54 million. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Williams, thank you for your comments. It looks like Ms. Hannon has a response. I'm going to, listen, folks, I'm sorry. I'm going to point of order that we need to get on with this show. I hear all of this charades, and I will lastly, I'm hoping that I can just close this out.
Please.
And that,
thank you.
Thank you. So before we vote, I can tell you how excited I am, and that I really think it is a big deal. You're right, $1.2 billion is a big doggone deal. It's the biggest bond that we've ever had in Fort Bend ISD. I also think it's a really big deal that we have 80,000 students to date, plus, and that we are trending up, guys. This ship isn't going back anymore. We have rerouted, and we're going in a new direction, soaring new heights as one of the most diverse districts in the state of Texas and across the United States, as a destination district and a place to be. We are trying to provide our kids with the best education and outcomes possible, and facilities that welcome them, that are bright and colorful and healthy, and that are long-lasting and built to last, so that our kids have a place where they can grow and succeed, and our teachers can be retained and rewarded. We are trying to move this district forward with positive energy, with accountability, transparency, communication, and all the things that we all want for all stakeholders, whether it's the taxpayers, it's the parents, whether it's as trustees or the employees. And frankly, we need collaboration and working together. And what I can say earnestly from the bottom of my heart is we had it with this. It wasn't easy, and at times it was pretty darn ugly. But we're there, and we have moved forward, and we're working and right-sizing this ship and trying to do the right things to create operations of efficiency and economies of scale, to use the taxpayers' money in the best ways possible to do what's best for all kids. And so with that, I thank all of you, from the trustees, the public for all of their engagement. I thank the EDC. I thank former board members. I thank all of the staff for the scrutiny we gave, right? And that you, in your resilience and your transparency, I thank everyone. And I hope that we can act as one FBISD and that we can move and get this bond over the finish line to do what's best for our community. And with that, thank you all, and may I please get a motion?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm ready to make the motion. Just bear with me. There's a lot of numbers here. So I'm going to ask all my fellow trustees to, the motion going to vote on option 4. I'm going to start reading. I move the Board of Trustees order an election for the issuance of bonds to be held within the district on Saturday, May 6, 2023, containing 3 propositions, which total $1,256,200,000, presented as option 4. A general proposition A in the amount of $1,180,830,000 for construction, acquisition, capital renovation, and the equipment of school buildings in the district, for the purchase of necessary sites for school buildings, for the purchase of new school buses, for the retrofitting of school buses with emergency, safety, or security equipment, and for the purchase of retrofitting of vehicles to be used for emergency, safety, or security purpose. Proposition B in the amount of $52,470,000 for the acquisition or update of district technology equipment, including student, teacher, and staff devices. Proposition C in the amount of $22,900,000 for the construction, acquisition, and equipment of a district natatorium, and authorize the board president to execute the order calling the bond election.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Day. We have a second by Mrs. Hannon. Do we have any discussion?
I just have a point of clarification. When I'm looking at the option 4 that's going to wind up on the ballot, I might be looking in the wrong section. Ms. Day, I believe you said $1 million. I can't even say this number, actually, but I think you said 830, and it reads in here 820 on Proposition A.
Madam President, if I may, I've actually received a message during the reading of that, and the correct should be $1,180,830,000 is the correct number.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's just not what's reflected in my packet.
Yes, ma'am, we noticed that was noticed and it was pointed out. She read it correctly, but the information that is in the packet is off slightly.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam President. So I just wanted to echo a couple of comments that were made earlier. So the meeting last week, so Mrs. Fuzetti, the way I communicated something, I was thinking, man, I should have said that a little bit differently. So I think you do a great job in the board meetings, and you did an even better job in that meeting last week. And I think the way I said it, I was like, I hope she didn't take that to mean that I think she doesn't do a great job in the board meetings. But just the passion that you brought to communicating the history of the district and how the decisions to squeeze the bonds, the last 2 bonds, negatively impacted the district in the long run and put us in the position where we are now. That was really helpful for me. And then also, Mr. Wiley, thank you for being here, and also thank you for your leadership with both the Economic Development Council and the Bond Oversight Committee. That was helpful information to kind of lay out how we have that public oversight in addition to us as the Board of Trustees. And so anybody who has hesitations, I would encourage you to reach out to those who are involved with the Bond Oversight Committee and ask them questions as well as asking us questions. And so I think that those 2 additional things that we learned in that meeting last week were really helpful to give me increased confidence in going forward. And I said 2 things, but I'll make it 3 if that's okay. Additionally, the savings from the commercial paper program, I believe, has exceeded the cost of the project management over the last several years. So it's north of $20 million in savings for the district from the commercial paper program. And so I think the bonds have been an example of great financial stewardship in Fort Bend ISD in the past, and I think that's another factor that can give us confidence going forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Seeing no further discussion, thank you, Ms.
I need to know how to vote. Okay, I'm confused. Okay, so Prop C and Prop B. Are we voting on two separate items?
No, ma'am. We're voting on option 4. And option 4 has a Prop A, B, and C in one motion, which Mrs. Day just read.
Right, okay.
Did you hear her?
Yes,
Okay.
I heard her. So when they go to the, when it's time to vote, the voter has an option to vote for Prop C and Prop B?
Yes, ma'am.
Or Prop B or both?
Ma'am, so the voter will have an option to vote on Prop A, B, and C
Got
separately.
it. So, okay, right. So, okay, understood. So if a voter doesn't like the whole bond, they have an option. Is what I'm
That's
trying to understand.
absolutely correct.
So my voting, and I'm just trying to understand, I'm not arguing. So if I vote yes on the bond today, it doesn't mean that I agree with all 4. It means that I'm just giving the voter an option A, B, C, and D.
You're
Correct.
giving the
That's what I'm
voter,
hearing.
exactly, you're giving the voter an option A, B, and C. No D.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I
All
just
right.
want to be clear on that.
I'm glad hey, that's what we're here for, is clarification. We definitely want to make sure we know you know what you're voting for.
Got it. Understood.
Okay, I think that concludes our discussion. Please vote.
I'm yes.
Well, the vote carries 7-0. May I please get a motion to adjourn?
I motioned. Are we ready?
We have
There's another item.
Oh, okay. All right. I was excited we finished that. Ready to go. All right. The next item is item B, consideration and approval of the proposed order for bond election on Saturday, May 6th, 2023.
No, you've just voted.
I thought we did both
You've
of
just
them in
voted.
one.
You have voted on the order. You've passed the order.
Okay.
It addresses.
So I am ready to roll.
We're ready to roll.
Thank you, Lord. May I please get,
But there's no.
okay, back to the attorneys. Guys, can we close this sucker out?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. May I please get a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
All right. We have a motion the time is 1:20 p.m. and we are now adjourned. Thank you all.
Because originally we were going to put it so they would have a vote for every proposition. And it's like, no. But I said, we don't need to know the information either. They have the information. Let's just go. And so A was just going to be.